Planet Retail, sitting here with Joe Jackman from Canada, Toronto, a brand strategy consultant with 30 years of professional experience and with experience in retail, having worked for Gap and for Duane Reade. We're going to discuss that. Joe, welcome to this interview.
Thank you so much, Boris. It's a treat to be here.
It's a pleasure. So, Joe, can you tell us a few words about where you're coming from? You started in retail, then ended up in brand strategy consultant. See, how did that happen?
Well, it was a circuitous route. I started as an industrial designer, that's my schooling, and began to work in retail. I had grown up in a retail family. My dad was with Sears in North America for his career. And I started to work on the customer experience side, store design, brand image, and so on, and built a company that shaped customer-facing brand imagery and experience. And but then I did a crazy thing. At one point, one of my largest clients said, "Why don't you come and lead marketing for, this was a $25 billion publicly traded, big Canadian retailer. Why don't you come and lead our marketing?" And I took that up, and I learned so much actually, living and working on the retail side. And now I've gone back into consulting to build a company that helps retailers reinvent themselves. And I apply business strategy acumen with my team and brand strategy, bring those things together with activation, and we turn that into customer experience and value creation. And I think what sets us apart is everyone can reinvent. We just help people do it faster and more profoundly.
Yeah, and you would think it's more important than ever because on top of all those high street brands, you now get the online retailers on top.
Yes.
Yeah, so what defines a brand in its essence? It's certainly more than a logo at the store entrance?
Yes, well, brand is one of those things it's a big tent and you can put a lot of things underneath it, but at its essence, brand is, who are you? What makes you special and distinct? And then how do you put that at the center of everything you do? So that no matter what category you're in, or businesses, lines of business, or product offerings, experiences and such, everything has a gravitational center.
Yes.
And the way I think about it is brand, particularly in retail, is that definition of DNA, some people call it purpose, elevated to an experience, made very, very compelling, and then executed consistently. And it becomes an ecosystem of how to think and behave and so on. So that's what brand is, and I'll be talking a little bit about that today.
Yeah, and before I ask you about your personal work, can you see any examples in global retail that are particularly great from your perspective?
Well, the ones I admire the most are those that were very, very clear on their brand and grew because of it, did a lot of things right, and then lost their way. And if you think of some of the better examples, Burberry would be probably a textbook example of, digging back into the company lore and history, and what was it about that brand that made it special? Why did it exist? And Angela Ahrendts, it's quite famous, and her creative director partner, took that essence and then turned it back into something powerful and relevant for today's community.
Yes, I admire the Burberry flagship store in London that really wonderfully blends
on
the
Regent Street,
traditional heritage with modern technology in the best possible way. I agree. Now, and your job is to take a brand that isn't performing as it should and make something different of it. And now, how do you sort of get to the point where the leadership of a retailer accepts there's need to act?
Well, two things that you've touched on there that are so important. The first is a case for change. Most businesses, and retailers particularly, need to begin evolution or reinvention right about the moment that they're most successful. Because if you think about it in brand life cycle terms, what comes after the peak? Decline, or you're going to go back up into the growth curve. A lot of companies leave it too late, and so making a case for change, even when it seems like we could just carry on and prosper in the way we have been, that's one piece. And then the second is collaboration. What we found is so much of strategy is done by a small group, a subset of the leadership. It's done often with partners, and they do it away, and then they come. And I was an executive at one time in a big retail company, and strategy was something that, at the highest level, was something that got presented and essentially sold to me and my peers, versus us actually participating in it. And there's a law of human nature, which is we support that which we help create. And the more inclusive you can be, the more people buy in, and the more you can actually galvanize an organization to change. And the big benefit of that is speed.
Yes.
The more everyone's aligned, the more they lean in, the faster it goes. And so there's a real secret sauce in that, and that is, the more you collaborate, the faster you can move. It actually sounds like the opposite, because we have to talk with a lot of people, it's going to slow us down. No, in fact, it's the exact opposite.
Right, and then Joe, a couple of retailers that you did really interesting work for, in my opinion, is Gap and the clothing retailer, and Duane Reade, the American drugstore pharmacy chain.
Yes.
Can you lose a few words on what you did for Gap, because the brand was running dull and your job was to breathe new life into it?
Yes, there was, of course, Gap is a corporation, a portfolio of a number of brands. And so I did some advisory work with my team on Gap brand, and then also on Old Navy. Gap was a great example of, here's a successful brand. It started in 1969. It created really the casual jeans, white shirts, t-shirts category. It celebrated a piece of American spirit and freedom, but eventually it ran out of relevance. And partly it's because the world changes around you. The other thing is that, if you're not bringing new customers, younger customers on board, it's a river. Brands move down the river, they continually need to swim upstream. So that was really the work in Gap, was to get clear on what's the DNA of the brand, and then how does that translate into relevance for younger customers. And part of it is you need to peel back and uncover, well, what's the core business? What do we have to be great at?
Yeah.
And then what does that allow us to earn the right to be beyond that? Old Navy was an interesting story. This was the fastest growing retail concept in apparel to reach $1 billion in sales from its start. And then when I came on board with the new CEO and chairman, Glenn Murphy, we saw a brand that had been in steady decline for 20 consecutive quarters.
Yeah.
Demoralized community. When they started, they essentially invented fast fashion, when you think about it.
Yes.
Very inexpensive, and the brand was built around a sense of fun. And so what we ended up doing was we uncovered the DNA, and we articulated it as fashion fun for all, and value is part of the fun. And we built an entire new proposition out of the existing one. Mm-hmm. Now, many things remained the same, but I'll give you one tangible example. This is what we think about it as big stroke change, enhanced stores, or an evolved product offering. But the brand, if it stood for fashion fun for all, values part of the fun, the young community of people that worked on the shop floor, they're all in their late teens, early 20s, pretty much. There was a rule in the business: no tattoos. And we said, if this brand wants to be relevant to young people, we can't prevent young people who work there from actually celebrating who they are and sporting their tattoos. Now, there might be the extreme, you say you can't do that, but so that was one of the rules we changed. We said, bring it on, be yourself within the context of this brand and this framework. It was fantastic and unlocked a passion for the brand and a resonance with younger audiences. That was just one of the 1,000 things we did once we were clear on where we were going.
Okay, but very, very interesting example. Thanks for that. And the other one, when you came into Duane Reade, what did you find and what did you decide to do?
Well, Duane Reade would be a good example of establishing a strong case for change.
Yeah.
Because here was a regional retailer with over 60% market share in Manhattan, and about mid 30% market share in the 5 boroughs.
Yeah.
The highest sales per square foot of drugstore in America. And everyone, a ubiquitous brand. Now, we discovered it really wasn't a brand as much as a well-known name and a store, but they said, why would we change? We're very successful. And what we had to show was, and we used data, was to show that against competitors like Walgreens before they bought them, CVS, Rite Aid, on every measure the customer cared about, you are not as good. In fact, you are woefully behind. And so we actually had to convince the inside community of Duane Reade that change was necessary. And that's essential because you need organizations to not only be comfortable with change, they need to become champions of it. They need to embrace it.
Yeah, and then change needs to be lived, of course. A brand needs to be filled with life. It's more than going to Duane Reade stores, putting up that very funky logo that you created. So how do you then keep a brand alive over the years to make sure the change doesn't get lost in the old routines?
Well, that's where brand DNA comes in. You know, you can be absolutely, if you want to chop down a big tree, you know, how do you do it? It pays to hit it in one spot again and again and again. And that's really when you think about brand DNA guiding every decision you make. We knew that Duane Reade, in its inception, stood for the idea of New York living made easy. Now, it just had become a bit of a junk shop on every corner, to be honest. DuaneReadeSucks.com was a very popular website that customers would go on and complain. But what we said was New York living made easy is actually a timeless idea. How would we interpret that today? And then over the years, and still today, it was just really a simple sense of which customers we focused on and how are we going to be helping them make life in New York easier. And that is an endless loop of things to do. You never run out of things if your mindset is to become, you know, a true brand and a leader in that space. And there's no one that does what Duane Reade does. And Walgreens saw that, and knowing the CEO now, he said, you know, we knew that we could out-store you and probably out-muscle you, but you did something we didn't expect. You became a brand with a very, very powerful connection to your community, and so it ended up being better bought than fought, and they paid almost 12 times earnings for that business, and it was a great success in customer regards and then in regards to value creation.
Okay, Joe, and now you're here at the World Retail Congress, having traveled that long way from Toronto to Dubai. So any very interesting learnings you're going to take from here?
Well, what I'm taking away is a reminder of the passion that retailers generally have for this industry, and the passion for customers and the passion for leadership. There's so many individual things that you can learn from individual cases and challenges people faced, and so much of that. And I think this is a world-class event, obviously, but you know, sometimes it helps to just be re-inspired. And that's what I've gotten in the last couple of days, is just an energy around retail and a love for it. You know, Solomon Lew was just awarded, Joe Malone, Tommy Hilfiger. You know, these are people that did amazing things, and you just can't help but get swept up with that. And you know, I just get recharged. It's wonderful.
Fantastic. Joe, thanks very much for joining us here. It's been a big pleasure.
My pleasure.
That was Joe Jackman
Boris,
of Jackman, Brand Strategy Consultants. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.